The revolution will not be televised. This quote isn't just about how real, meaningful activism often goes unnoticed by mainstream media. It's a reminder that true revolution begins with the mind. Before action, there must be a shift in consciousness. To be a revolutionary, you must unlearn the internalized messaging that society says about you. Though originally rooted in the civil rights movement, this quote resonates far beyond that context. It holds meaning for many issues today. Take environmentalism, for example. Environmentalists are often kind of accused of not caring about people because we just want to keep places wild. But this is because we know when it's all said and done, we have to have ecosystems on this planet so resources can regenerate, whether they're regenerating for insects, fish, or humans. Yet our modern culture operates on taking more than is needed and rarely gives anything back. And this is generally allowed because people are filled with the misconceptions that nature is here to be dominated, or taking is needed for progress of our species, whatever that means. What if I were to tell you there kind of is really a revolution that isn't being televised, that the people that have unlearned the misconception about nature told by our modern society are revolting? Across the globe, environmentalists are trying to keep places wild, not because we hate people, but because if nature stops regenerating, life on this planet is impossible. And since 2012, nearly 2,000 environmentalists have been murdered. This is a number that is probably grossly underestimated, but the perpetrators have ties to industries such as mining, logging, and fishing. These victims just wanted their sacred lands to be respected, wanted less exploitation on the land and people, and wanted nature to just exist. And so this video is just one of the stories of the people who risked their lives for the forest, the wildlife, and everyone else who depends on them. In the KwaZulu province of South Africa, there is a rural town called Fikile. The people who live there are subsistence farmers, people who grew their food and medicine. They may have also supplemented their needs by foraging in the nearby forest, and some family members might have taken jobs in the cities so they can earn extra money for their family. In 2007, the Tendele coal mine opened its doors and began operating in Fikile. Its presence wasn't exactly welcomed because it employed very few people who actually lived in town. It displaced those that lived in the operation's footprint, and we're talking about 6.5 square miles. And then homes, graves, and sacred lands were handled with disrespect. These actions caused the people in the town to experience psychological trauma. Like, there is a report that the mine workers would bulldoze down people's home, and then the vibrations from the blasting would damage them too. And there is an extensive report that supports that this trauma was real among the people in Fikile and not being over-exaggerated. And of course, knowing that someone who stood up to the mine was killed, the trauma left the people in an even worse predicament because they were scared to stand up for themselves. Scared to stand up for themselves when they negotiate how to be compensated for damage to their homes and then also their relocations. Tendele's activities degraded nature's ability to regenerate through soil erosion, and then the blasting caused water and air pollution. The degradation resulted in people's inability to farm, thus being unable to fully provide for their families. Families in the area began to get sick from the pollution, and this put a lot of burden on the women in town because they tended to be the primary caregivers to their family. As a result, they had to take care of their sick family while they themselves were beginning to get sick. Then came Fikile Ntshangase. She lived in Ofundweni on the eastern side of the KwaZulu province, and she was the leading voice in expressing opposition to the mining activities. She was a senior member of the Mafulozi Community Environmental Justice Organization. So I'm just going to call this MCEJO. And this organization addresses social and environmental injustices within the local community. They took the people's case to court, stating the environmental impact assessment was inadequate. The EIA, is something that is done pretty much prior to any industrialized activities. And it's used to predict what kind of impacts the activities will have on the biodiversity, the environment, and then the people in the area. There usually are professionals on site to monitor the actual impacts of the activities, and they can stop work if the activities are violating certain laws. Sounds all fine and dandy, right? But who was stopping work as people's houses were being bulldozed? Over the course of years, people in the town were experiencing distress as they tried to tend to their livelihoods in Ntshangase. But as I said, it was being interrupted and pretty much becoming impossible because of the mining activities. So as a MCEJO member, Fikile began to collect information from the people, and when the mine was looking into expanding its operations, MCEJO filed a lawsuit to halt operations, citing several environmental law violations and that the EIA was incomplete. This expansion would continue environmental degradation, and it would displace 21 families in the process. From there, it was a little difficult to get a clean timeline, but from what I gather, there were some hearings with the court case. And during the hearings, the lawyers representing the mine used kind of confusing tactics to basically make MCEJO feel like they were confused. And this is something that MJCEO said themselves, stating, quote, "In the beginning, going to court was very confusing and intimidating. Complicated laws and unfair judgments made us feel stupid. It has taken all these years to realize that we are not the confused ones." In 2019, Fikile was getting harassed by unknown people, and she received threatening phone calls. Now, I don't think she reported these to the authorities. This seemed to be something that her daughter reported after her death. Tension persisted for quite some time, and it's reported that MCEJO would have these committee meetings where mine workers, possibly the suspected killers, would show up, locking the members in the meeting rooms, and physical and verbal assaults would ensue. Now, it does seem like there are police reports that have been filed for the physical assaults that happened during these meetings. But at some point in time, a memorandum of agreement was drafted, which basically asked for the court challenges for the expansion to be withdrawn. Some of the members of MCEJO signed this agreement, but not Fikile. In an interview to justify her refusal, she stated, "I refuse to sign. I cannot sell out my people, and if it need be, I will die for my people." Then, days before her murder, she stated that she was planning to draft an affidavit to document an alleged bribe of $350,000 in return for her signature, and that she knew about the secret meetings that were happening behind the scenes between the mine workers and the MCEJO staff. Then, on October 22nd, 2020, back at her home in Ofandweni, she was watching her 11-year-old grandson, and he was playing with some dogs outside. Now, some reports state that he was also playing outside with some friends, and then other reports don't really mention that anybody else was present, so that part is kind of unclear. But the grandson reported that 4 men went up to him and asked if Fikile was home, and he responded yes. They asked him to make sure the dogs were secure, and then the men reportedly forced themselves inside the home and shot at her, so Fikile, 6 times, with 5 bullets actually hitting her. The 11-year-old grandson's mom and daughter of Fikile, Malungelo, arrived with police flooding the area. It was about 8 p.m. at this point. There were 6 bullets shot with only 1 missing her, as I said this before. And she had already been pronounced dead when Malungelo arrived. While the police recognized that this was a murder, Malungelo says police have asked her questions, but no one has really been properly investigated or interrogated. A year after her death, Malungelo held a protest with friends outside of the police station, demanding an update on the investigation because they weren't giving her any. All she knew was that when police identified potential suspects, those people were hard to track down because they were moving around. Just because the voice that was speaking out against them the most was no longer with us, that didn't mean that the mine was able to just go on with the expansion. After Fikile was gunned down, Malungelo has made connections with other people calling the mine out, and she has carried on Fikile's legacy to push back. MCEJO continues to press on with their court case, However, they are seeing similar patterns to this day. In 2021, Malungelo reported other members of her community who have continued their association with MCEJO are now experiencing similar threats, saying, quote, "They say the same thing that my mom used to say before she was killed, that they're receiving phone calls from unknown numbers and people just telling them to back off and stop going to our meetings." In May 2022, a judge sided with MCEJO and required that Tendele conducted a proper EIA. Then in February 2023, the mine started to just kind of bulldoze its way into the next town, so it was going on with its expansion. MCEJO brought it to court, and in June 2023, a different judge ruled that the EIA was not necessary. They allowed Tendele to carry on their expansion without one. As protests and court cases continued to be filed, the same patterns that Malungelo cited in 2021 were being reported as still continuing. This time, MCEJO shared that as recently as last year, so we're talking 2024, the families that have not agreed to the conditions of their relocation as part of the expansion of the mine were shot at. So no murders, but they're basically being shot at to intimidate these people. Now, surprisingly, it was somewhat hard to find an obituary of Fikile because I would have liked to end with a little more information about her personal life, but I did find a quote from her attorney that kind of sums up the passion. She had to be a steward to the environment and a protector of the people that are stewarding the land. Her attorney said, quote, "She was incredibly outspoken about the truth and justice, having no qualms about calling people out who she felt were being devious or untruthful. She did not compromise her ethics, ever. As her attorney, I will miss her truth, her fire, and her courage. She did not deserve to die. We are devastated by her loss." So I think that's going to do it for today, folks. There are definitely more stories about these Earth defenders who are getting killed across the globe. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear about Fikile's story. We talk about all things kind of related to the environment here. And so if you want to hear more from me, like and subscribe. But that's going to do it for today. Bye.